Hi, welcome to InFocus Recouched. It's great to have you with us.
Today we'll look back at interviews you did, Kent, with some pretty high-profile Christian communicators. Kay Rizzo, who's written more than 50 books.
Oh, yeah.
And she's written more than 1,000 articles.
Wow.
Whoa, I know. And much-loved Aussie broadcaster Sheridan Boise.
Oh, very warm and friendly people, both of them, and even fun. We'll also look today at the changing ideas around marriage. Should we just forget the idea of marriage being a lifetime commitment? Oh. Oof, yikes. But first up, live long and prosper with these tips from the doc.
Now, men don't live as long as women. Doc, why is that?
Why? Because they don't take any notice of their health. They don't care. Women are used to running along to the doctor for every little bit and pieces and so forth, but men ignore their own health at their own peril, so they get things that go wrong with them.
And this report too tough to take care of themselves, huh?
Absolutely,
okay.
That's what they think up here.
Right.
And this report came in the British Medical Journal just a few days ago. It points out that fellows ignore their health. They think it's being weak or something negative about it.
Right.
They won't see the doctor. And matter of fact, a lot of them are in working hours and the doctor's offices close when they could go. So that's one difficulty. But they just can't be bothered. Don't like talking about themselves. And that's why so many guys die of or catch or develop prostate cancer, which is the equivalent to breast cancer in women. They could get checked, don't bother, don't care.
Right.
And they...
So it catches up and it's too late. Okay.
Absolutely.
What about lifestyle choices, risk behaviour?
Risk behaviour. Well, they love taking risks. They like their smoking. They like their alcohol. Are they going to give it up? No, absolutely no. Why should they? The other bloke does it, so I'm going to do it too. You get into that culture. So the culture is
sort of
one
belief of being bulletproof, if you like.
Absolutely bulletproof. We are bulletproof, yes. So they die years before women in the overall total pattern, which is pathetic. Anyhow, a crowd in Australia has pioneered what has now becoming universal throughout the Western world. It started in Australia, a little tiny country town in Australia, according to the British Medical Journal, and they set up men's sheds. Now, this means guys just get together at a certain time, probably on the weekend or when there's many guys who want to come along, and they probably do a bit of carpentering or a bit of this or their hobbies, but they sit and they talk and they drink their coffee, and they wouldn't drink their beer, would they? No.
I hope not, right?
And hopefully the guy who's probably running the thing will start and talk about health issues.
Excellent.
And it may encourage the guys to go and have a PSA examination, see the doctor, have a blood pressure check, and generally trying to get them involved in caring about their own health.
A more balanced lifestyle, in a sense.
Yeah. To try and encourage them. And bit by bit, this is catching on. I think it's a great idea. The thing that started here in Australia is great.
Yeah, I saw my first advertisement for one up at Port Macquarie just a few weeks ago. So, Men's Shed meets at the Uniting Church. Something
That's
along
right.
those lines. Yeah,
and they
excellent.
go along, and hopefully this will grow and become a big thing, and guys will take more responsibility, more interest in their own health. So guys out there, wherever you are, whatever country you're in, and this goes worldwide, as we know, please get together with your male friends and think about your health and probably see a doctor at least once a year. That's my suggestion.
Well, there you go, Ken. How long since you've been to the doctor?
Dora, I'm due for a checkup in just a few days, okay?
Wow, and you organised that all by yourself?
Well, my wife kind of did it actually, but I am going.
Typical.
Anyway, let's take a look at this next segment. A few years back, I was really privileged to meet author and speaker Kay Rizzo during an arts festival at Avondale College. Check it out. Now, you started your working life as a teacher, but here you are now, 58 books under your belt, a writer. What happened?
I had a senior challenge me that if he had to submit material to an editor, a professional, that I should have to too. And so I did, and it's history.
This was in our college or high school writing class,
This is in Academy, Milo Adventist Academy. Absolutely.
Wow.
He thinks he's really hot stuff now.
Oh, he's the one who discovered Kay Rizzo, yes.
That's right.
That's great. Look, I'm just overwhelmed by the not only the number but the variety of books that you've published. We've got books about religious persecution and human rights. We've got books about domestic violence. We've got historical drama, fiction sort of things, inspirational books. What is going on there with so many genres? What's going on in your mind, I wonder sometimes?
I get bored easily.
Yeah.
I do not. I will work on maybe 2 or 3 biographies, and I don't want to do another biography. So I'll jump to something else. It's probably not the best thing for my profession and fame, if you want to call
You're
fame.
supposed to stick to one
There's
genre
one genre,
strictly, aren't you?
right.
Brand
but
yourself.
It's an awful lot more fun.
Is there a common thread running through?
I don't think really, though there are a number of them that are about children that have been abused. But I discovered that thanks to a reader. I didn't realize I'd written so many of them because I had come from a somewhat abusive family.
Right.
And so but I didn't realize.
So subconsciously, these things were coming out in your writing that perhaps you are still trying to make sense of?
Well, I think it was to show that you can overcome. You do not have to let this get the best of you. You know, that God has a plan for your life, and He will carry it through if you give Him a chance.
Wow. Now, some of your books have been very successful indeed. I think in particular of your book, I Will Die Free, that follows the story of Noble Alexander, who was in a Cuban prison for, what was it?
22 years.
22 years. And you, I guess, helped him write his life story? Is that what happened?
Yes, we did it long distance. He would actually send it through. He had to write out because I couldn't understand his accent, his heavy accent. So he would write it out, and he showed how some of the notes they sent from the prison, they wrote on cigarette papers this big. And I had to use a magnifying glass to read the letters. And they would send these over the walls, and then people would deliver them to the right people to communicate.
So that book was recognised by Amnesty International.
Right.
It was on the bestseller list for, what, 10 years?
It's still there.
It's still there?
Not on the bestseller, but it's still being purchased.
Does that go to your head? Is there a risk that that'll go to your head?
It's not me. It was Noble's story, and it was God working through him to make it happen. And I just was the lucky person, or I don't believe in luck, I believe in blessed. The blessed person who got to write it.
Yeah.
You know, and to share in the joy that came out of this terrible situation.
You have had readers email you or approach you when you're speaking, or send you letters. What sort of responses are you getting from people who have read your books?
I get regular, now the emails, I get regular all the time. And they'll whoever has read one and they want more in a series, for instance. And but probably the most dramatic has been from my autobiographical On Wings of Praise, where it was about my journey from feeling suicidal and depressed all the way to incredible joy and praise, and how God led me through those steps. And it has almost every women's ministry that I go to, someone comes up and says they've read it and it saved them from doing something stupid.
Wow.
And so I just thank God. You know, who thinks that a good thing like this, a bad thing like this, could turn out to be a good thing in your life when God is in control of it?
Boy, what is it, do you think, about the power of a story, whether it's a true story like your own, whether it's a fictional story? What is it that attracts us?
People respond to people. They don't respond to ideas. You know, you have Einstein's theory, and everybody knows it and everybody accepts it, but we're not really in tune with it unless we know more about the man and the background. But I think we respond because we are human. It's part of human nature. And we can put ourselves into that person's life.
Now, if someone wanted to get hold of one of your books, obviously your website?
KRizzo.com.
Well, that's
www,
easy.
of course.
Yeah, that's easy. That's
Yes.
on your screen right now.
That's right.
But also through what?
Through the Adventist book centers, if you have one in your local community, or you can go on to Amazon. They're all listed under my name on Amazon.
Good old Amazon.com.
Absolutely.
Love them. So, any advice for aspiring writers?
Writing takes discipline. Someone once said it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration.
Yeah.
It takes discipline of writing every single day. You don't just talk about it, you write it. And it's very, very important. And also you have to read. And it's also, if you're letting God use a very big part of you to touch someone else's life. And you have to decide if you want to do that.
You've got to be quite vulnerable, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To be truthful, you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you for sharing just a little glimpse into who you are today, Kay. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been fun. Thank you.
Wow, it looks like I've got a bit of reading to catch up on, hey?
Oh, yeah, me too. I have actually read a couple of Kay Rizzo's books, and they're actually quite readable. Not the romances so much, I have to admit, but some of the others are, yeah, definitely worth checking out, I can tell you.
What? No romance? You big softy? What about all those 80s chick flicks you always recommend to me?
Look, I'm just trying to be helpful, Dora. Just trying to be helpful. That's all it is. Hey, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back in just a moment.
We live our lives running around, rarely stopping to ask ourselves where we're going and what our final destination is. In the end, our lives become little more than routine. Step beyond and discover a path that offers comfort, love and hope. Visit hopeoffer.com/step beyond or call 1300 300 389 for your free copy today.
Onions add great sweetness and flavour and a good base to any curry. Going to add some ginger, some garlic. Look at that, nice and chunky. So we've got our spices, gives it kind of a Sri Lankan feel. Add some tomatoes, tomato paste, some honey. Roasted vegetables in these kind of dishes are always great. If we add some creaminess to it, and that dish is now finished, ready to hit the table. I'd recommend you to give it a try, and it's so easy.
Hi, welcome back. Now, Dora, I think you're going to find this next segment interesting because in it, Trafford Fisher introduces a pretty radical idea about marriage. It's called a wed lease.
That sounds a bit weird. Let's take a look.
You know, I hear wedlock, deadlock, would have got less time for murder. But explain to us.
I don't know it's a new word, but some lawyer in somewhere wrote in the Washington Post, I was in Washington, that we should establish wed leases, Danielle, as opposed to maybe as you said a wedlock. Okay. He said is that when couples marry, they marry for a lifetime. That's been our traditional stance. He said that's way too long. He said why don't we reflect where marriages are really up to, and you can establish a wed lease, just like in real estate. So you can do a term of 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. And someone said, what about children? And he thought he respected that couples have children. Yeah. And so the idea would be that right into the lease that it would continue at the end of the lease unless you specifically ended it so that the children, were kind of understood.
What I'd like to know, does that mean you can upgrade to a newer model?
Sounds like it, and that's what I'm worried about. I think it's all a bit... I don't feel comfortable about it at all, Danielle.
Being devil's advocate, though, Trafford, in modern day life, that is the growing mentality, isn't it? You're not happy, you move on.
Well, we have prenuptial contracts, post-nuptial contracts. And look, in some ways we can understand people saying marriage is too high a risk. So many couples, sadly don't sustain the relationship, so why don't we reflect that in the way we establish it at the start? My concern is that the research that keeps emerging is that couples who recognise and commit to the long haul at the start seem to have a more stable marriage, there's a high degree of satisfaction in the marriage, and the children seem to do well. I was going to say better. I think there's some research for that, clearly, because they have this sense this is a permanent relationship. So I think if we establish right from the start this is just a short-term thing, we're almost going to, I think, live up to the prophecy. We're going to cut this down.
Self-fulfilling.
Yeah. So I think we need this sense of commitment, this sense of we're in this for the long haul. So I'm a little nervous about this wed lease. I don't know. I'm not sitting comfortably with that, Danielle.
No, and you probably expect something a little bit more intelligent and thought-provoking from a lawyer, but there you go. It's the world in which we live, isn't it?
It is, and it's a bit sad.
Okay, so thank you, Trafford. So Trafford's take-home message, I think, is, try and stick it out for the long haul and finish the race.
Whoa, scary. What kind of chance would your marriage have if right from the beginning you think it won't last?
Yeah, it's the kids also that I think about. You can just imagine them thinking, mum and dad's wed lease is due to expire next year. Are they going to renew it again or not?
That's pretty rough on the kids.
Yeah. Hey, well, changing tack, let's take a look at this next interview, which is with Christian radio broadcaster and author Sheridan Voysey. We all have dreams, and sometimes God blesses us with fulfilling those dreams, but sometimes those dreams aren't fulfilled. Sometimes they're broken dreams. And I'm privileged to have in the studio this morning Sheridan Voisey to tell us about his book, Resurrection Year, which, well, it's a negative way to describe it, isn't it? Talks about your broken dream. It's much more than that, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the publisher's subtitle is really nice: turning broken dreams into new beginnings.
Right. Okay.
So there's the negative. I think all of us have a broken dream by the time we reach our 30s or 40s. And but I guess the message of hope is the fact that there is a new beginning after a broken dream.
Now, the focus of your book, Sheridan, you and your wife, Merrin, for 10 years were wanting desperately to have children. And for 10 years, despite IVF and every sort of technical, attempt strategy under the sun, it wasn't to be. That would have been a pretty tough time, I imagine.
It was tough. It was tough. There's a proverb in the Bible, Proverbs 12, that says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick." And we discovered that to be the case, particularly for my wife, Merrin. She really struggled over those 10 years. And those 10 years, they included an attempt in 2006 to do IVF. They included special diets. They included all sorts of special supplements. They included healing prayer. We had some special healing prayer for us. We thought that might actually have broken through and given us the miracle that we needed. It wasn't to be. We then, in 2007, went on the Australian Adoption Register, waiting for our child, waiting for the phone call to come so we could go and pick up our child. In 2 years, the phone call never came. We tried another round of, a series of rounds of IVF in late 2010, and basically, Kent, it ended really with a phone call on Christmas Eve after we'd been given good news that we were actually successful with our final round of IVF, our final embryo transferred. We were given a phone call on Christmas Eve saying, "We're so sorry, we got it wrong."
That would have been a rough Christmas.
It was a pretty tough Christmas Eve.
Wow. And through this 10 years, which must have sort of made it more difficult in some ways, you were actually being quite successful in your career. I mean, a lot of our viewers have probably heard you on the Open House Christian radio program, which you founded and hosted and interviewed some incredible people there. So your career is stellar. Meanwhile, at home,
therein lies the irony.
Rough. Yeah.
Really, Resurrection Year is a story of two 10-year dreams. One's a 10-year dream that never came to be, and the other one is a 10-year dream that did come to be, but then had to be relinquished. My career was going wonderful. I had a 10-year dream to start a particular radio show called Open House, and it did come to be in 2006. It became a national show very shortly after that. I had a dream of writing books, and I started to write books. I had a dream of speaking at conferences, and I started to get the engagements. And then during that time, we've got this broken dream of trying to start a family, and my wife being decimated during that time, and me kind of having it all. I guess it came to a head when we were sitting by the Sydney Harbour River one day, and my wife said to me, "If this final round of IVF, if this final embryo doesn't result in a child, if we do not have a family, the thought of life going on as normal for me is just too depressing to contemplate."
Wow.
I put my arm around Merrin, Sheridan to the rescue,
yeah.
And I said, well, what would be a good consolation prize for you? What would you like to do if we don't have a family? And she said, "I think I'd like to move overseas."
Wow.
I said, "Moving overseas?
That's the last thing you wanted to hear.
That's the last thing I want to do when things are going so well." Anybody who knows publishing knows that there's very little chance of success if you go over to a country that doesn't know who you are of being published. But I guess that was the choice that had to be made. Here was an opportunity of at least giving Merrin one dream that could be fulfilled, but it meant the relinquishment of the one that actually...
So that first year in the UK was your Resurrection Year?
Yes, we actually had our Resurrection Year. It was basically from June 2011 to June 2012.
And in what sense was it a Resurrection Year, or is that giving away too much from the book?
Well, the full story is in the book, but it was an opportunity for us to leave, to go and to start again in a new place. I do want to couch that with the fact that we weren't running away. That's an important thing. We weren't running away from the problems. We dealt with the problems while we were here in Australia. But Merrin had always wanted to live and work overseas. She then gets a phone call from Oxford University, no less, offering her a job. Wow. And so we saw that as God's guidance, that this was the place to go and have that new beginning. And when we got there, it was an opportunity for her to start again. And in many ways, if you want to use the language that I use in the book, our 10 years was like a wilderness journey where we were walking around in circles, and it was
looking for the promised land.
Looking for the promised land and never reaching it. When we get to Oxford, it's almost as if Merrin enters a new promised land, a new beginning for her.
Wow.
And for me, it's kind of like leaving the wilderness and entering a new wilderness. It becomes a difficult time.
Well, I guess this book has been incredibly successful. There's been people been raving about it, so that's certainly worked out for you okay.
That's the surprise.
Yeah,
That's the surprise. This is the surprise, and the fact that it wasn't my idea to write a book about our story. It was actually the suggestion of a well-known British author, poet,
Adrian Plass.
Adrian Plass.
Yeah, great guy.
He suggested that we should write the book up into a story, and as a result of doing that, suddenly I've actually got myself a contract with the biggest Christian publisher in the world. That wasn't expected, and more important than any of that is actually to see the emails and the Facebook comments that people are giving to us, having read the book and saying, well, now I can start my life again. Now I can start after my own broken dream. Now I can find God again when I didn't think He loved me.
Do you find that through this book you are meeting people who are opening up and being vulnerable about their broken dreams? And I know everyone's situation is different and unique, and we're sometimes careful about giving advice, but are there things you think that you're able to share with them?
Every second day, on average, we're getting an email or some sort of message, saying my life has changed as a result of reading the book. And I don't exaggerate that. It's not just simply it's a nice book, thank you, it's inspirational. It's my life is somehow changed by it. So this is where I think anybody going through a broken dream that's watching us now, here is the note of hope. After the wilderness comes a new beginning. The Jews, after 40 years wandering in the wilderness, entered the promised land. Jesus, when he enters the wilderness, after 40 days, he begins his life-changing mission. And I think for us, it came when Adrian Plass says to me one afternoon, he says, look, there are positives in being childless. I know that you're trying to look at the positive sides. There's opportunities to travel. You've got more money to yourself, more time, all of those kinds of things. He said, that'll only take you so far. If you really want to see how this can be turned around, you look at Jesus hanging on the cross in his crucifixion. Look at the amount of people that he is ministering to on the cross before the resurrection.
Through the suffering.
He's ministering to his mum. Putting her in the care of his friend John. He's ministering to the criminal crucified next to him, saying, today you'll be with me in paradise. He's ministering to the people who've crucified him. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. He's ministering to us, forgiving our sins. He said, all of that Jesus is doing through his suffering. If you allow him, God will take your suffering and redeem it, recycle it into a blessing for other people. Therein lies the history of where the book came from.
Wow, that's really thought-provoking,
Isn't it?
And really challenging. Hey, thanks so much for your time today, Sheridan.
Great to talk to you.
At all good bookstores, as they say.
All of them.
Yeah, Christian bookstores in particular, and your website, it's right there on the screen. Thanks so much for your time. Man, looking back on that interview, Dora, it's still an inspiring story.
Yeah.
And I still find Sheridan Voicey it's just incredible in how he's made sense of all that suffering that he's gone through in his life.
Yeah, and I suppose so many people who might have gone through these troubles, it would have really weakened their faith. But for Sheridan and his wife, it seemed to bring them closer to God.
Yeah, look, it's truly inspiring. Hey, thanks for your company this week. We hope you enjoyed the program as much as we enjoyed making it. God willing, we'll see you next time on InFocus Recouched.
God bless.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, this script was used for hundreds of years in ancient Mesopotamia, which is regarded as the cradle of human civilization. Many monuments and tablets unearthed in Mesopotamia had this strange writing on them, but no one knew what it meant. Well, all that changed here in Iran at this mountain known as Mount Behistun, which stood alongside the ancient Silk Road. On this mountain I found a number of ancient inscriptions, one of which is the famous Behistun inscription, which was authored by Darius the Great between 522 and 486 BC. The inscription tells the story in 3 languages of how Darius put down multiple rebellions in Persia after the death of Cyrus the Great. And you can see Darius with his foot on the chest of one rebel and others with ropes around their necks being led toward him. Now, the 3 different versions of the same text are written in 3 different cuneiform script languages: Old Persian, Elamite and Babylonian. Now, being in 3 languages, it meant that just like the Rosetta Stone with 3 languages led scholars to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, so after many years of hard work, scholars, especially Sir Henry Rawlinson, were able to decipher the ancient cuneiform writing of the Mesopotamians. Now they could read the cuneiform on the clay tablets and the walls of the palaces. And as a result, we can now understand much of the history, the culture and religion of the peoples of Mesopotamia, such as the Sumerians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians and the Persians. And as with the deciphering of the Egyptian hieroglyphs, it also demonstrated that the history depicted in the Bible was accurate and not a bunch of fairy tales, myths or legends. For example, this piece of real brick from ancient Babylon has the name of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon on it, a man who's mentioned numerous times in the Bible. Then there's this black obelisk of King Shalmaneser III of Assyria. Now you'll notice on one of the panels this man bowing down to the king. Now the cuneiform writing tells us it's King Jehu of Israel, and of course he's mentioned numerous times in the Bible. Also mentioned is a king of Assyria, known as Sargon, who captured the city of Ashdod. However, for a long time, critics of the Bible said this was a myth, a Bible blunder, because they knew of no such king in Assyria. But after deciphering the cuneiform script, one of the first names scholars read on these clay tablets was that of Sargon II. And not only that, but when archaeologists excavated the ancient city of Ashdod in Israel, they discovered the fragments of a stele of Sargon II. Little wonder, you see, that the great archaeologist W.F. Albright said this about the Bible. In the centre of history stands the Bible. Thanks to modern research, that's archaeology, we can now recognise its substantial historicity, meaning its historical accuracy. To sum it up, he said, we can now treat the Bible from beginning to end as an authentic document of religious history. In other words, this is not a book of myths, of legends and fairy tales. It's a book that is historically accurate. You can trust the Bible. Now, if you want to discover more of the mysteries archaeologists have unearthed, go to our website where you can learn more in our free Digging Up the Past course.